Speaker.
Simon O'Connor.
Very pleased to take a call on this Health Protection Amendment Bill here on its second reading. Can I thank the Honourable Annette King for her generous words. I think such generosity is probably costing me thousands of votes in my electorate at the moment who are going, what's he doing?
But you lost 15.
Actually, in all seriousness, Mr. Speaker, I do want to acknowledge all the members of the Health Select Committee, and in particular Annette King, Kevin Haig from the Green Party and Barbara Stewart from the New Zealand First Party for the cooperative nature in which the committee is working. Lewis Wall as well as a Labour member, and then my fellow National Party members, Jackie Dean, Barbara Kuriger, Scott Simpson and Dr Shane Retty. A fine committee, and I think one working together because we understand that there's always politics in all things, but health is one of those matters where we try to work together. And I think we've heard in the speeches tonight, two in so far, that by and large there's a lot of agreement, but also, and it hints at the political nature or the difference of views, that you don't agree on everything. So this bill, and I'm very pleased to see that members of the House are supporting this from all the parties, as I understand it, is in two parts. The substance of the bill is around contact tracing, and the second part of the bill, not as substantial but of course as important, is around sunbeds. As the Minister pointed out, we had 71 submissions. I thought that was actually a really good number in light of the nature of this bill, and in fact I thought a very high quality of submitters that came before us. I can't remember the exact breakdown of how many came to talk to us around the contact tracing side of things versus the UV tanning. But I'm sure other members will echo, and I hope they will, that it was the quality of the submissions and the quality of the oral presentations. These were people who were experts in their field. And that's not to take away from the individuals who might come and choose to share their experiences. But I thought very high-level submissions to us. 22 people were heard. It kept the committee busy. But I can say for myself, and I'm sure for the others, actually it was incredibly fascinating as we were talked through the different issues. Mr. Speaker, the first part of this Health Protection Amendment Bill is around contact tracing. For those in the House, and particularly for those at home, this is around how we work out who a person with an infectious disease has been in contact with. The intention of this bill is to enable health authorities to better manage infectious disease outbreaks, or to limit them when they arise. So we're talking infections, and I hope my father listening at home is not going to blush. We're talking things like syphilis and gonorrhea, tuberculosis, HIV and the like. So some serious diseases that are out there in the community, or potentially so. With those, I note that tuberculosis is currently under another act. One of the elements of this bill is to actually take it from being a distinct Act of Parliament, a Tuberculosis Act, and integrate it into this Health Amendment Bill. But these are serious infectious diseases, and when they arise, we as a society need to move swiftly and promptly to limit their effect. One only need to think of the measles outbreak. Now that's not, I better be clear, one of the infectious diseases noted at the highest end of this bill. There's good reasons for that, but I think of the outbreak, I think it was in Christchurch, and just how swiftly these diseases can spread, and therefore, consequently, the state, the health authorities, if you will, need to move swiftly to manage it. And so we have introduced these extra diseases to be traced, and a big part of that is who are the people that those with an infection have been in contact with. And up to now, the provisions haven't been sufficient enough or proportionate enough. And to put it really simply, if someone chose not to actually enable contact tracing to help with certain diseases, it wouldn't happen. So we're strengthening the ability of health agents to encourage and then enforce the information required so we can make those contacts and better understand the spread of the disease. One of the debates, of course, is around privacy, and that was discussed at length. There was some concern from some submitters around particularly the use of the NHI, the National Health Index number, that it could lead to the identification of particular people and consequently discourage them from coming forward. Mr. Speaker, we heard from a good number of submitters who work within the epidemiological field to say, look, the need for this data is absolutely paramount. So having data such as sex, date of birth and the NHI number, very, very important. So one thing the committee did, and a few of the changes it looked to bring about, was to list principles, which we're hoping will be clear not only to the public, but to the courts if they need to get involved. And the first principle, above all others, is that the intention of this bill is to protect public health. Not just the person with the infectious disease, but all of us. That is the paramount principle. But we as a committee thought it was also really important to stress that respect and dignity of the individual must always be noted and upheld. And thirdly, though not in a priority order in this case, that a proportionate response is followed. So depending on the nature of the infection, their proximity to people, for example, the length of the infection and so forth, what is the proportionate response? Because as indicated by Annette King implicitly in her speech, there are the ability to bring about court orders to force an individual to release the information required. Again, we would want that to be a proportionate response depending on the infection. I want to briefly touch on the question of acute hepatitis C. This was something which members on the committee will know about. We spent an enormous amount of time considering whether acute hepatitis C should actually be brought in to the same level as gonorrhea, syphilis, HIV and the like. We took a lot of advice and decided it didn't require at this stage to be at that top level, but I think it's really important for the House to understand, and those submitters, that it does remain on the schedule. It is still part of the Act. One has to think of this as a graduated bill, a graduated response. So while it's not at that top level, it is in there. It's a formidable disease, and fortunately one that doesn't occur as frequently as some others, but when it does, needs a lot of treatment. And I'm very pleased to see actually there is a number of very good pharmacological options available now for people there. Briefly, I want to acknowledge, as the Honourable Annette King did, Kevin Haig's contribution around appeals. It was really important, and certainly for me, that you always have consistency in legislation, so the ability of a person to be able to reach through the respective courts to have their appeal heard around these matters is consistent, and so reaching the High Court makes a lot of sense. I think importantly though, the orders remain in place. The committee did debate this a bit, that if someone is going to start going through the legal appeal process, it's not going to stop the ability of the health organisations to engage. When it comes to infectious diseases, we need to move promptly. Look, I want to turn to the sunbeds, the UV tanning beds. Look, the science is, thank you Mr Speaker, the science is very clear on this. It's unambiguous, and I'm more than happy to stand on the government side and say this with the legislation as it is, with a graduated response to UV tanning beds. This bill seeks to say that under 18s should not use them, and that there should be regulation for those that do. And Auckland City Council, amongst others, has actually quite a good system in place already, and it was really good that they came in and talked us through how they regulate sunbeds in Auckland. I think that is our model to follow. I want to be clear, it's not the model. There are a few we can look at, but we are looking at a regulatory approach. It's sort of that graduated or one step at a time. Again, the science is very clear. As many members know, I worked at Southern Cross before coming into Parliament, and so while not a doctor, involved myself with a lot of things medical, and particularly in the dermatological and plastics field. And look, there is no doubt the issue of skin cancers in this country and the place that sunbeds can play in that. I think I heard from one of the experts, one of the doctors I used to contract with, something like 7 minutes a day of sunlight is all that we need of sunlight. So where is the need for sunbeds in that place? So I think, Mr Speaker, we've come to a proportional response in this regard. We understand the science, we understand the information put to us by a number of medical experts and the likes of the Cancer Society. I think on this side of the House we're saying we understand that, we understand the excessive risk for those under 18, but we feel at this point an outright ban is probably not the best way forward. We'll introduce a graduated approach to that. we will see that regulations are put in place. And I think, as any responsible group will do, in this case a government or the ministry, the minister will continue to engage with the information. So I think we've landed in a good place, and if I might say, Mr. Speaker, I think it was good to put a bit of light onto this bill as I conclude.